Hello everyone. It's Robola here. Sorry about that. It's a bit weird. Um, and you know what? I was browsing Reddit today, and I came across a post which, at first, I thought was like an everyday post, like whatever. Like it's always like new people asking questions on the Reddit, and I mean that's great. But he was asking about. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, whoever it was. I did reply to you, but whatever. He asked about build orders and how you remember StarCraft 2 build orders. And you know what? At first I was like, well, it's easy. And but then I really started thinking about like how you do learn build orders, and I've come to the conclusion that it's not actually a lot about memorizing. It's a lot about game knowledge, honestly. So I started thinking like, how did I first learn builds? What was the first build I learned? How have I come to the place where I am now, where I know a few builds? Well, I realized that the first build I learned was, well, I learned the Reaper expand, and the Reaper expand is pretty much just, I mean, how long is the Reaper expand? Like the first minute of the game, maybe. It's not really a build. It's just the first minute. But from there, actually, the first longer build I had was a build I made myself. It was like a Widowmine drop uh, that I had, and it was a bit longer. And then I think it wasn't a very long build, like it was maybe 3 or 4 minutes. But from there, I sort of learned real builds, or builds that actually good players come up with. So I think that's where you need to start. Actually, you need to start with the first minute, and then you sort of need to make your own build. And it doesn't matter if it's not great, um, just as long as it kind of makes sense. Because this way you learn when you make your own build, you really learn the entire internal logic of how builds work and how what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna sort of talk. This is a game. This is just a ladder game I played the other day, and this build I actually made up myself. It's not like it's super original or like, oh, it's great. It's actually not the best, but it is a build I made up myself. And I'm gonna start talking about how builds work and what you should think about when learning builds, and how you can start making your own builds. So, we're gonna hop in and we're gonna talk about this a bit because, so, it's a TBC. This doesn't really matter for this purpose, but so this build originated from me being very frustrated with TBC. I'd done the 2-on-1 60 marine drop with Stim for a long time, and it felt really inflexible, and I was like, I need to come up with something better. So I thought, well, Hellbat pushes are good, and instead of looking up a build, I just thought about, well, how would I effectively do a Hellbat push? So that's how I developed this build. It's not perfect. I'm not claiming it's perfect, but the build has an internal logic, and I'm going to show you how I made that. So this build started out with um, um, gas first, Reaper expand, which just makes sense if you want any sort of factory play, which is what a Hellbat push is. So start out with the depot and the refinery. So for you new players, there's two variations in the beginning if you want to go for a macro build, that is. You can go racks gas or gas racks, right? The depot always goes first, but it's gas racks or or racks gas. So why would you go gas before racks? Well, it gives you a few options. First of all, if you go gas first, this means that you will have enough to make a factory fairly quickly after you drop your CC, which is nice. And if you go gas second, that means you have more minerals. So usually that lends itself to more marine based play. There are some exceptions to that, but I'm not gonna get into that. That's basically what it comes down to. Do you want marines or do you want a factory quicker? That's more marines or factory quicker. So it's just the usual. And always something to remember when you first start getting into builds is that every build implies that you make constant SCVs, unless it's some form of all-in, right? So it's constant SCVs here. Just going back and forth. This is what I do. And oh, you actually messed this up a bit. My SCVs is standing around. Whatever. So it's just a gas first expand, like I said. I'm just rambling. But yeah, so it starts out as any build, really. You get the expansion because it makes sense. Like boom, right on time. I don't have any of the timings now, right? This is something new people get really confused about. Like, well, how do I remember all the times for everything? Well, you don't. See, it just makes sense. If we go back here, we see that, well, I'm getting my barracks, and now I want my expansion, so I'm saving up for an expansion, right? And as soon as I have 400, I drop it. Boom, 400. Well, I want a factory, so as soon as I have 150, 100, boom, goes the factory. Well, I'm almost supply blocked. Well, I'm gonna make another recipe. What do we do when we're almost supply blocked? Well, I guess we're making a supply depot. Well, I'm also getting a reactor. Oh, why am I getting the reactor, you ask? Well, I want Hellions, so I can switch them over. This just makes sense, right? I don't have any of the timings now, and then I'm getting a second gas, because I'm gonna need gas. Because I also want a fairly quick starport. I want to be able to get medivacs. I'm gonna show you. Well, I also need the armory, so we can actually make Hellbat, but I'll show you that later.
Additional supply depots required.
So you're just scouting around. Getting the starport.
Complete.
Putting people in gas. Boom. Here. I'm getting the tech lab. Why am I getting the tech lab? Well, I want stim, because this is a bio build. So this is why this build is different. A lot of Hellbat pushes go into, well, they use cyclones to get into a mech transition, but I don't like mech, so I've done a Hellbat push for bio. Which is kind of what I wanted. I wanted a Hellbat push for bio, so I made one. Right? So boom, we have some Hellions. That's great. This means we can pressure again. So the other great thing about this build is I can be out on the map. I can be present on the map. I have a Reaper, I have Hellions. See, getting a Marine, it's great for chasing out Overlords. I'm getting Stim. So this Stim is probably one of the weirder moves in this build, and it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. I just like having Stim. My first variant of this build actually had a reactor. So why do I make a tech lab now? Well, I found that, sure, I can get more Marines. But what ended up happening was I was lacking minerals. I got too much gas. So that's the first thing. I got too much gas. And also I don't have stim. So if the Hellbat push fails, it takes way too long until I get stim. So basically I have to just sit back for 2 minutes and waiting for stim. I don't want that. So when this Hellbat push is done, I want stim to be done so I can begin cranking up Marines and building up that bioforce.
Add-on.
So behind this, I'm making Hellbats, or Hellions, because I want my Hellbat push to be as strong as possible, right? Making the armory so I can actually morph the Hellbats. Here we go. I'm floating a lot of minerals. What do? I'm making stuff. What do? I'm floating minerals. What do? Well, I'm making expansion. Holy crap! Who would have guessed? When you have minerals, you boom make an expansion. See, it's not that hard. Before 5 minutes, great timing, great timing. I'm putting pressure on. I have my CC down. This build kind of makes sense. It's not perfect, right? I'm not claiming to be some expert at this game, but it kind of makes sense. And I think doing your own builds like this gives you an appreciation of what's a good build and what's a bad build. And if it doesn't work, think about why the build didn't work. So one thing I can work on here, for example, is I have a lot of gas. I have a lot of gas that I'm not using. Maybe I can get my second gas later. Well, that's not an option really in this build because I do need my gas. But maybe I can find some way to spend this gas in the future, right? So in the meantime, I'm pushing on the other side of the map.
Additional
Boom.
supply depots required. Our SCV's base is under attack.
So I have medivacs in my Hellbat push, which is really nice. So the reason I did a medivac variation, you might think, so the obvious reason is so I can heal my Hellbats, but that's actually not the biggest reason. The biggest reason is if this Hellbat push fails, I turn them into Hellions and drop them in the main base instead. This build gives me so much flexibility. It's the exact opposite of what the 2-1-1 want. I wanted a flexible build. You know what's great about this build as well? It's very defensive. I'm going gas first. I have a quick factory. I can get a quick tank out if I want. I'm getting my starport on time. I can get a quick banshee if I want. Right? This build is so flexible.
Base is under attack.
And it has aggressive potential. It has listen, this build this is a perfect middle of the road build. It has a quick third expansion. It has Hellion pressure. It has a Hellbat push. If the Hellbat push fails, I can do a Hellion drop. It is safe, right? It has everything, right? It's not the best build in the world, but it does have a little bit of everything.
Base is under attack.
So now I'm floating a lot of minerals, and that's not because of the build, that's more because I suck. Because ideally I should be adding on a lot more racks here.
Ready to blunder.
Which I'm doing now, but it's a bit too late. Those were actually been earlier, but that's more my mechanics being rusty than anything else. And I win the game. So this build is completely of my own making. Well, not completely of my own making. Like I'm not the first to do a gas first Reaper expand. Like it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel here. But like some of the moves, like getting the medevacs, I haven't really seen anyone do a medevac, Hellbat push with medevacs like this. I often see them use cyclones or something else. But this is the main thing, right? Builds make sense. So in order for you to understand the underlying sort of logic of how builds work, you should really make your own build. Think about what you want out of your game. What is your goal? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to... So usually a good thing to think about when you're making a build is, well, I want to do some pressure. I want to stay ahead economically. And I want to be safe. Those are the three things. Pressure, economy, safety, right? These are the three things you're going to think about. And not every build is going to have all three. But if you sacrifice something, I want you to be aware that you're doing that. So start thinking about these things. Well, pressure. Do I want any pressure? Do I just want to go super duper greedy and just ignore pressure? And if I don't, do I want to stay safe? How do I stay safe? What if he does this? Right? All of this I've planned out in the build. So if say the opponent does some kind of roach trolling, well, I stop if I scout an early roach ward and no third base, I switch the factory over with the barracks and start making tanks, right? And marines. Boom, I make bunkers, right? I have it planned out. If my opponent has roaches when the Hellbat push hits, because that means my Hellbat push will do nothing, I will turn the Hellbats into Hellions, pick up and drop them in his base, right? I have thought out all these scenarios, and maybe there's some builds that hard counter this build. Well, that's gonna be true with every build. So just that's the thing. You want to think about pressure, economy, and safety. What are the concerns? Can you put pressure on? If you can't, maybe you should change your build, or maybe you're happy with that. Maybe you're like, I don't want to put pressure on. Well, that's fine. But always have these three things in mind. And also, does the build make sense? Do I have too much gas at any point? Do I have too many minerals at any point? Maybe I can spend those on something. Right, so these are the sort of things you want to think about. If your third base is late, maybe you can cut out a barracks somewhere to get the the CC earlier. Maybe you don't have to make the 8 Hellions. Maybe you can settle for 6 and get an earlier expansion. If you find yourself falling behind economically. So these are the sort of things you want to think about. And when you've done this and made your own build, because that's what I was started with. Like I did the Reaper expand into a Mind Drop. That was my first build, and I made it myself. Well, not the Reaper expand, but the Mind Drop follow up. I came up with that myself. It gave me the tools to be able to read builds. And that might sound weird, like, well, it's a build order, you just do what it says. But understanding why you're doing something makes it easier to actually do it, because you don't actually have to remember all of the build. You just know that, well, I know what the point of this build is. So, for example, the 2-1-1 build, like, well, when do I, for example, get my second Drax? Okay, so you do the build once, and they're shaking gas. Did I say that? I think I said that. So when do I get my second gas? Maybe you do the build once, and you realize that, ooh, I don't have enough for my starport. I don't have enough for stim. Maybe I'm getting it too late. And then you look at it again. Oh, I'm getting it too late. And then you memorize that, right? Ooh, I don't actually have as many marines as I should. What am I doing wrong? Okay, and then you start building on this. But having that base knowledge of just understanding how builds work is very important, because you just doing it off the sheet, it's going to be really hard. Just memorize all the timings and all the orders and everything. It's going to be really hard unless you understand how builds fundamentally work. So that was what I wanted to talk about. It got kind of rambling, but I thought it was a very interesting topic, and it's not something I've ever thought about. Like, how do you first learn builds, and how do you develop the tools to learn builds in the future? Because for me now, when I look at a build, usually it makes sense to me. I just look at a few key things. Oh, he had that at that time. Well, how did he have that at that time? Well, I know the mineral and gas timings for everything, so he must have done this, this, and this, right? And a lot of it's just recycled. You just do a few tweaks here and there. Most builds are similar, at least with Terran. I don't play Serga Protoss, but well, I do a little bit, but I don't actually have builds with those races. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Build orders. Hope you learned something from this. If I missed something that you think is important about build orders, like when you first learn them, please put a comment below. Unless you're Zerg, because Zergs don't have builds. No, just kidding. Anyway, see you guys next time. Bye.